G'day YouTube people, let's talk about how active transport can actually solve congestion and parking problems around apartment construction sites, like this one in the western suburbs of Perth. So most of this article is actually lots of complaints by residents about how their streets are being parked out by tradies who are driving their utes to this particular site. But the interesting thing for me, about halfway down the article, is where a resident says a lot of them are using electric scooters and bikes to travel to the site. Isn't that interesting? Now, if we have a look at the map, that dotted line running down the middle of it, that's the principal shared path which runs from Perth to Fremantle. It's like 20 kilometres long. It's fantastic. The dashed red line running off to the right of it is where the Eric Street shared path is one day going to be extended from the railway line up to Stirling Highway. Now, at the moment, the new section of a new section was opened, 6 months ago, running from the railway line down to the beach. And this newspaper complained endlessly about the construction of that path and what a terrible thing it would be and how it would destroy the suburb. Well, isn't it now interesting that we've got tradies who are using bikes and electric scooters to get to this work site and reducing congestion and parking woes around the site? I think the site is where that red circle is. I haven't actually ridden down there and had a look, but I think that's the case. And if you actually look at this photo, you can see, I think that, the railway line runs across in front of it at the bottom. That's that kind of browny grey strip. So you can see how close this site is to where the principal shared path runs. All a tradie would have to do if they're riding to this site is find the nearest subway or overbridge, cross the line, and they're at the work site. Fantastic. Now, here's an idea for the councils that are involved in sites like this. How about, as part of the development conditions, you say that the developer has to build a secure locked cage for the tradies to lock up their bikes and their scooters, because they're expensive and they're very easy to steal. But doing that would obviously encourage people to ride these things to and from the site rather than driving their utes. So, idea for council there. Now, I also know from experience that a lot of tradies actually don't need to drive to work every single day. And I worked on the construction of a 30-storey office tower in George Street about a decade ago, and I was there a heck of a lot for about 6 months. And the thing I saw was, being in the centre of town, almost all the tradies caught the train or bus to work. They didn't drive their utes in because obviously there was nowhere to park them. We're talking about a big site in the middle of town with no parking either on site or, anywhere nearby. The closest parking really was over in Darling Harbour. So the way things functioned is they could book a time slot to drive into the loading dock to do drop-offs and pickups, and that was of equipment. So let's say the gas fitters wanted to come in and start their piece of work on the building. They would book a time with the loading dock manager to come in, and a bunch of them would come in say a dual cab ute. A couple of them would jump out and they'd get all the tools and equipment out of the back of the ute, unload it onto the loading dock because they only had 20 minutes. And then the driver would take off and either go back to the depot or go and park at Darling Harbour or something like that and walk back. And the rest of them would use the goods lift, or they had one of those lifts on the outside of the building, which was scary as hell. They'd put the stuff in that and take it up to whatever floor they're working on. And they had these huge toolboxes on wheels, which were very secure. They were locked up at the end of every day. Now, when they finished their bit of work on the project, they'd simply reverse that process, book a slot in the loading dock, ute drives in, bunch of blokes, load all the tools and stuff and toolboxes onto the back of the truck, or ute, sometimes a truck, and out they'd go. And so that meant, no one was just driving to work with their lunchbox and, nothing else. I actually did see people riding to work across the Piedmont Bridge in steel cap boots and, hard hats, not cycling helmets, going to that site. So, it's clearly something that can be done. But like I said, if councils put this kind of thing into the development approval, it's not just good enough to say, oh, you've got to provide some parking on site for work vehicles, they should also be saying put in a secure cage for your e-bikes, your scooters, the stuff that can be easily stolen, and give the tradies confidence that at the end of the day, their stuff is still going to be there. They'll be able to get home because no one's come along and stolen their scooter. Um, yeah. Anyway, it's just fascinating how you build this infrastructure. You allow the use of things like e-scooters. You don't ban them, and there's an uptake of them by people you probably never expect to see riding one.